Frontline Gaming presents 40k Stat Center with your hosts Val Heffelfinger and the Falcon.
The veteran wargamers enlisted 100 lambs for the slaughter at Slaughterfest 2019.
It was summertime and the slaughter was fine when the basement wargamer presented Summer Slaughter.
Who would be the first to breach the gates at Game Castle Open? Do you know?
And we stat for pap and donaires when Gork's Grand Bash rolls into Halifax.
Northern Ireland knew not to notify us of NATEFEST, but we found them out anyway. And with the wailing of Thor drifting off into the background, we are joining our listeners after a clean, crisp, and perfect intro, if I do say myself. How are you tonight? Today, whatever the heck it is, Falcon.
I'm doing great. And how are you today, Val?
I'm doing just fine. I just want everyone to know that the Go XLR has received a firmware update. That's the streaming, built for streaming style mixer that I have. And we are now recording 4 tracks on different tracks, which means I might get the audio balance correct this week. I'm just saying.
That is fantastic news because as everyone who listens to us knows, our audio has been absolutely awful this entire time.
I can't hear it. I honestly don't know what these people are talking about, but there's enough of them who say that I'm way too loud and everything else is too quiet, and I guess I'm just deaf or insane. I don't know. I can't hear it, so I don't know what's up.
No, who knows? But you know what? It doesn't really matter. We're producing some pretty great content. Somehow we managed to do that intro on only, 3, 4, 6 takes. And we're on to another excellent week of Warhammer.
Yeah, an outstanding week of Warhammer. I mean, a more normal busy week than perhaps the last, which, was a bit of a slog. But this episode shouldn't be an hour as long as we keep this intro down to something reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, we had 2 majors, 3 GTs. It was far less crazy than what we've apparently come to expect from these avid wargamers.
Absolutely, and actually, there's a great episode that Pablo's stitched together from Chapter Tactics. This week he had Reese Robbins, the venerable Paul Murphy from Forge the Narrative, my former podcast home away from Chapter Tactics. And as well as Sean Morgan came out, and those guys talked about the history of competitive 40k, and what better than 2 living pieces of history, Paul Murphy and Reese Robbins, to talk people through it. I've listened to about half of it, and it's been a lot of fun so far.
I did listen to the whole thing, and it is one of my favorite Chapter Tactics podcasts to date. They did an excellent job. Already let Pablo know. That opening brought a tear to my eye. It was just really, really good show.
Yeah. So still killing it over there on the Chapter Tactics podcast, part of the Frontline Gaming Network, which Pablo plugs every time, and we got to remember to do that. Frontline Gaming Network, of course, you can subscribe to us on any of your streaming thingies. For any kind of podcast app. We're everywhere now, including YouTube, and I've been posting things to our Facebook page, too. You can listen basically anywhere. If you're not listening to us, you've got a problem, man.
Yeah, for sure. We should also throw out a plug for Capital City Bloodbath, which we're both attending here in just over 2 weeks now, August 16th through the 18th. They broke 100 players. They're capping it now at 120, I believe. But they're getting, 3, 4 people sign up every day now. So yeah, it's going to be a big one.
Capital City Bloodbath, the crown jewel in the major circuit of Canada. Definitely, if you can, get out there. The commute from the airport is literally across the street, so probably is as far a walk from the gate to the front of the airport as from the airport to the venue. It's fantastic, and I highly recommend it. Come say hi to us.
Sure.
And there's all kinds of other systems, Batman and AOS and other stuff. I'm not sure what the status is on those, but lots of things to do there, and it's in Ottawa in the summer. It's beautiful. What else we got? Oh, Frontline Gaming. Frontline Gaming currently has 20% off of their battle mats. What do they call it? Frontline Gaming mats? Is that what they call them?
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah.
People go buy them.
I think Reese cares.
Okay. And he does listen to us, apparently.
Yeah.
I was shocked.
It's amazing.
And lastly, we should probably plug Best Coast Pairings. They do that thing that lets us do this show. They provide us with all the events that we can track. along with a few others, but BCP are definitely the forerunners right now in that industry. And it's without them, this podcast isn't possible.
What an incredible segue.
Tournament news is made possible by bestcoastpairings.com. Download the BCP TO app to organize events for just about any tabletop game system. Download the player app to easily find and participate in events from around the world. Subscribe to BCP for as little as $5 a month to support the team and unlock additional features. Available for iOS and Android. bestcoastpairings.com. Competitive events easier.
All eyes were on Temecula this weekend when Slaughterfest 2019 got underway at the Pechanga Resort and Casino. Hosted by the veteran Wargamers Re-Enlisted podcast, the event managed to crawl into the triple digits, having exactly 100 of their 102 spots show up to attend.
In a surprise turn for the VGR team, they only managed to bring up TNA a handful of times over the weekend, and at last count only succeeded in offending about 11 people.
Oh, they're getting soft.
Let's listen to what the TO, Robert Rotzalk, had to say about the tournament.
This was our first annual Slaughterfest. We wanted to run a tournament where competitive players could have a great time, knew what the standards were going to be, and knew going into it that it was going to be an event that catered to competitive players, but also had casual players there having a good time as well. This tournament was very special to me. It was our first major, but more importantly, we were able to pay tribute and honor Jeff Robinson by having a table there for him so people could have a quiet moment. We put initials on a stream, and we had a raffle that raised money for to help out with his expenses. On top of that, it was just a tournament that we felt we worked really hard to make sure was well run and executed properly with good amount of terrain, plenty of space around the tables so that anybody could play, and you felt like you were on your own little table. Also, catering to making sure that food and drinks were affordable for everyone. I think we achieved all of that.
Okay, I didn't know if there were more clips. The event was streamed by the team at Frontline Gaming and featured commentary by Adam, the Latin Gandalf Solis. There were some excellent games caught on tape. The players were mic'd, and you should be able to check them all out at twitch.tv/frontlinegaming_TV. As Robert noted, the organizers and sponsors put together a beautiful memorial and charity raffle in honor of our friend Jeff Robinson. I won't lie in saying that it brought a tear to my tired eyes.
As to the competition itself, after 5 rounds, the tournament saw 3 undefeated players stroll to their top tables. Richard Pretty Dick Cozart, also of VGR fame, and Arthur the Tsunami 2, Chaos v Chaos, would face off against each other on stream, while Alan Destro Hernandez would see himself pared down in the worst way possible, having to take on Brandon Deep Blue Grant.
Now, we're going to spoil something up front. Brandon did beat Alan in what sounded like a slobber knocker, and removed the possibility of having 2 undefeated players, and Alan taking the absolute worst submarine ride to victory, which meant that the game on camera was the one to watch. To make things even better, both Arthur and Pretty Dick were running lists that were far from the norm for Chaos builds these days. Let's take a look at what the Tsunami brought to play. So Arthur here, he brought a Chaos Space Marines battalion, Black Legion, with Abaddon the Despoiler, a Exalted Champion with Goris Vex's teeth and a mark of Khorne. That's the Chainsword Lord, for those that are wondering. He then had 90 Chaos Cultists, a unit of 3 Obliterators with no Chaos mark. He then had a Thousand Sons Battalion with Ahriman, a Demon Prince of Tzeentch, a Sorcerer, an additional 30 Cultists, and then a Khorne Demon Detachment with a Bloodmaster, a unit of 15 Bloodletters, and a unit of 20 Bloodletters. Now, unfortunately, due to some miscommunication on our parts, we were unable to get Arthur's take on his list and the event itself until just before we recorded. That said, he does briefly go over some of his strategy in an interview with Adam after Game 6, if you want to catch the VODs.
Luckily, despite our incompetence and a miscommunication amongst the hosts, Arthur was able to send us a great breakdown of his list and the event itself.
Slaughterfest was awesome. It was my first major, and they set a really high bar for other majors to meet. Venue was huge. All the tables had plenty of room to walk around and place your army. I've been to a few of Ray and Rob's event tournaments in the past. I highly recommend them. They also did a touching tribute to Jeff Robinson, whose absence was felt throughout Slaughterfest. I'm sure it wasn't easy to continue putting on the tournament or for the Frontline guys to come compete after such an emotional week. Class acts all around. My army works by combining all the elements of the Chaos faction that have been nerfed to hopefully lull my opponents into a false sense of security. It's a list with lots of elements I've used throughout 8th edition, so I'm fairly familiar with their strengths and weaknesses. Defensively, the list is straightforward. Lots of fearless cultists, screening characters and denying deep strike. The cultists offer me cheap wounds, come back on any board edge for some needed mobility, and can provide a bit of offense, although not as much as they used to. Offensively, the list is more complex. I have one big combo, which is the Obliterators getting all 4 marks from the Black Legion strat, plus Spickling Flames from the Demon Prince for +1 to wound, plus Veterans of the Long War for another +1 to wound, plus the Crimson Crown from the Corn Herald, and then plus reroll for all attacks from Abaddon. The Crimson Crown gives Corn Demons within 6 inches of the character wearing it an extra attack on a wound roll of 6+, and this works in both melee and shooting. So for 4 CP, I can shoot 18 Obliterator shots, rerolling all hits, +2 to wound, extra attacks on 4+, and they shoot twice because of Endless Cacophony. I explain this combo to all my opponents before every match so that my opponent is aware of what I can do, and so that they can plan around it. I have another combo with the 30-man close combat cultists. I can pop the Black Legion strat to give them all +1 attack if they outnumber enemy opponents within 3 inches. And then for 2 CP, 1 for that stratagem, and then 1 for Veterans of the Long War, I get 91 attacks from the 30-man squad, full rerolls to hit from Abaddon, and then full rerolls to wound from the Exalted Champion, potentially fighting twice if I need to for another 3 CP. I use this to counter hordes, so like orcs, plague bearers, things like that. Then outside of that, I have the 2 Bloodletter bombs, mortal wound spam from the Thousand Suns characters, character sniping psychic powers, and Abaddon going in and smashing face. The key for me in every match is usually trying to identify how my opponent plans on killing 120 cultists, and then finding the right win condition for me to take advantage of their plan. That can mean emphasizing different aspects of the army against different opponents, because I do not have enough CP generally to fuel every tactic that I want to use. Going into the final table, I was pretty much sick to my stomach. Richard's a great player, and his list was the one list I saw in the tournament that I could not figure out how to put up a decent fight against. His bikes were going to be a major problem, and I expected him to kill at least 60 to 90 cultists first round easily, and I wasn't looking forward to getting blasted on stream. I was thinking that maybe we could get a long table deployment, I could do some smart screening, and be able to put up a decent counterattack, but then we got Frontline Assault for deployment, which meant it was a short table with lots of rooms for his Zangors to teleport. After that, I had only 2 plans: either go first and be able to get some board control, or turtle in a corner and counterpunch when he comes in. I ended up going second. Turn 1, he does what his list does very well and moves forward and kills almost all my cultists on the board. There's 1 close combat cultist left for me to use Tide of Traitors on. Even though his first turn looked really bad for me, I was lucky that Armon was left on 1 wound from perils, and that he charged in his bikes to get them close and to my characters. I brought back the close combat cultist, killed the Lord of Scordon with Abaddon, killed all his bikes, and then tried to hold enough territory to bring in my Bloodletters next round. I think the turning point of the game was my turn 2 and his turn 3. I had 3 chances to put myself in a great position to win the game on my turn 2. I tried to kill his epitome that was locking my close combat cultist with pistols, and I even popped Veterans of the Long War, so I'd be wounding on 4s. Unfortunately, the epitome survived with just 1 wound. If she had died, then I could charge my cultists into his demonettes holding objective for a big point swing. I also tried to warp time Abaddon so he could charge Richard's sole remaining Lord Discordant. That failed. I also tried to kill all his Zangors with my Bloodletters, and that failed as well. All that said, I still could have been in a great position if I had remembered my Consolidate move with my Bloodletters to screen my characters. I didn't do that. Richard capitalized on it, killed my Exalted Champion, killed a Sorcerer. he did a brilliant move of killing Abaddon and then consolidating into my Bloodletters to keep my Bloodletters from charging and killing the Discordant on my turn. And then he also succeeded in a Hail Mary shot of trying to move his Demon Prince in to one-shot my Demon Prince in the first round of combat, which he successfully did, and I think was absolutely the right call. Overall, it was a great game, and I hope it was an interesting one for people to watch. My favorite moment of the tournament was my turn 2 in round 5 against Brandon Grant. I had gotten tabled by Brandon the first time I faced him, an experience I'm sure I share with many others. Going into the match, I identified that my Obliterators were probably never going to get in range of his tanks, so they were best used as a threatening piece as opposed to doing any real damage. Because of that, I thought my best chance to win was to be able to clear his guardsman screens with my cultists and oblits, so that I can then charge my Bloodletters into his backfield and tie up his tanks in close combat. Because of this, I spent the CP to deep strike my Herald to give my Bloodletters rerolls on their 3d6 charges, which is something I rarely do. I usually keep the Herald on the ground with the Obliterators so that they can get the Crimson Crown aura. On my turn 2, Abaddon had just finished killing his Bulgrin in the center building and was looking to get into his backfield. I had exposed my Obliterators on turn 1, basically sacrificing them to his tank commanders in order to kill some guardsmen on his right flank. So then I charged Abaddon out of the building, killed one tank, and consolidated into another. I have my Obliterators all make their charges, kill guardsmen, and pin his tanks. So by the end of turn 2, I had Bloodletters and Abaddon in his backfield, unable to be targeted because they were in close combat with tanks that couldn't fall back. It was a great feeling to have taken such big risks against an amazing opponent and to have them pay off. After that turn, Brandon looked at me and said, "I think you have this, but let's see if I can give you the game of your life." And that absolutely terrified me. He played amazingly well in the last few rounds from a very advantageous position, but luckily I was able to pull out the 3-point win, which then got me to the final table to face Richard.
Meanwhile, Richard brought an absolute mess of a multi-faction chaos list, taking advantage of a series of stratagems, TO rulings, and general shenanigans.
Here we go. Richard's Cozart's Slaughterfest winning list. He's got a battalion of mixed heretic Astartes. So leading that is Araman, of course, a Demon Prince of Tzeentch, of course, obviously Thousand Sons, and then he's got 2 World Eater Chaos Cultist units, both with Mark of Khorne. There's 10 of them in each. And then he's got a unit of Thousand Sons Zangors with a Brayhorn and Instrument of Chaos. There's 25 of those guys. He's also got a Foul Blight spawn from the Death Guard. And then he's got 10. That's right, 10 Black Legion Mark of Slaanesh bikers. 2 of them have a Melt-A-Gun. The rest of them have... 3 of them have a Melt-A-Gun because there's a Combi Melta on the champion. The rest of them with their Combi Bolters. And then in another battalion detachment, this one is Chaos Demons, aligned with Slaanesh. In this, he's got the Contorted Epitome, the Mask of Slaanesh, which he calls out as being one of his favorite little pieces of tech. 3 units of 10 Demonettes and 1 unit of 30. And then finally, rounding it all out, he's got a Supreme Command detachment. And this one is the Flawless Host, of course. And it's 3 Lord Discordants on Hellstalkers, because that's what they're riding around the battlefield. So there's a lot of stuff going on in here, a lot of units that you don't normally see.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the list itself is one of these, like, quote-unquote Lord Discordant lists, but that big block of 10 bikes is something that you don't see very often. Mm-hmm. Very deadly because it puts out a ton of shots, right? The combi bolters plus the bolters that the bikers themselves have, and the Melt-A-Guns. It can dish out a ton of damage, especially Marcus Slaanesh. He's got those World Eaters cultists so that he can get a special deny stratagem off if he needs to. And then those Zangors, which did cause a bit of, I wouldn't say controversy. There were questions online about this because it was ruled at Slaughterfest that you were allowed to take both a Brayhorn and the Instrument of Chaos from the Index, which is technically legal based on Index rules. A lot of tournament TOs decline you to take both, indicating that the Brayhorn is just an Instrument of Chaos. But they chose at Slaughterfest to allow you to have both. Which means when those Zangors deep strike in, or when they get basically slingshotted by the Demon Prince, They have a 7-inch charge off the deep strike instead of an 8 or a 9.
Richard's got a lot to say about his list here. He's got some really good clips, covers some similar ground, but also calls out a lot about the Slaanesh elements in it. So here we go. Here's his list and MVP unit.
My list is a little strange. There is a lot of units that most people have never even seen on the table. Like the Mask of Slaanesh. I mean, I can't remember I've seen another one even at another tournament. So that's one of my favorite units to throw down. But I have a pure Slaanesh demon detachment that has a Contorted Epitome and 50 demonettes and the Mask. A mixed Heretic Astartes detachment that has everything ranging from Ahriman and a Demon Prince for the Zangors and Dark Matter Crystal shenanigans to Foul Blightspawn, so I can stop you from fighting first when you charge me, and the Demonettes always get to fight first. So you charge me, I get to hit you back automatically. That is a massive, massive tool against Orcs, Genestealer Cult, or even opposing Chaos armies. I got Bikers in there that are just Black Legion for just going up, shooting the hell out of any screens. And I got the World Eater Cultists that no one really wants to be wasting their time shooting at Cultists. They don't really realize that, what's the point of those guys until halfway through their psychic phase when I'm shutting down something out of 4 up that I really don't need to go off. So, and in my list, I have too many high priority targets that the stuff that you actually should be worrying about is not the stuff that you're typically shooting at. My list also rounds off with 3 Lord Discordants that are all Flawless Host. They don't kill that much, surprisingly. They've done a bit in my Tau games, but really they're tougher than they look. They're pretty tough to kill, and they are the greatest distraction carnifexes my list has ever had. My favorite unit has to be those Chaos Bikers. There's 9 of them. There's 3 Meltas. So with shooting twice, you're putting out 72 bolter shots and 6 Melta shots with +1 wound from Veterans of the Long War, hitting on 2s from Prescience, and I make them Black Legion, so I'm re-rolling 1s to do that. They are amazing. They've killed so many units in every single one of my games that they always just punch so hard that my opponent has to deal with them. And in my army, there's other things that they really should be dealing with, but now they see how much effort that the Bikers can put out that they have to deal with those first. So they are by far my favorite unit, and I'm surprised that no one else uses them.
There we go. Very strong advocacy for Chaos Bikers.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, it puts out a ton of DACA, and this is really the first time we've seen them with any kind of major success. I have seen them a few times in lists that have kind of been middle or bottom of the barrel, but never with such great success. So good on Richard for piloting this to the top table.
Yeah, because this is not a a gimme event. This was actually, I really want to call it out because the TO kind of undersold it. I don't know if you saw any pictures of it, but man, this place was beautiful. It was a huge convention hall. Really well spaced out. It looked like the train was well appointed. Just a fantastic event.
Okay. Both players felt that this was a matchup that would largely be determined by who went first, as the lists were absolute meat grinders with high alpha strike potential. The game only made it to turn 4 as there was a lot of thought taken by both players on close combat positioning and zoning coverage, but even then there was a lot of death on both sides of the table. Let's hear what Richard had to say.
My favorite in-game moment has to be when Game 6, playing against Arthur 2, I got first turn and I killed 99 cultists in one turn. And unfortunately, I target prioritized wrong with the Lord Discordant and autocannon first before I shot all the bolters on my Chaos Space Marine bikes. And that one cultist was all that was left, and he was able to tie the traitors back. But the amount of pressure and force I was able to put on the front of that game made me think that I can do this. I got this chance. I can win this major. And I was right. It was too much force all at once, and his army couldn't fully recover towards the end, and I was able to win it. So that that was my favorite in-game moment. And then just a shout out to Slaughterfest. That was an amazing event, and all 6 of my opponents, I didn't have a single bad game. I had a couple tough ones, some really, really scary close call ones, but I had 6 great opponents, and I couldn't have had a better weekend, and I can't wait for Slaughterfest next year. So thank you very much.
Big congratulations to Pretty Dick for getting his big boy pants on and finally pulling off his first major victory after bridesmaiding for so long.
Give me some of that bump.
Tournament news.
Hey guys, this is Nick Nanavati from Knights of the Game Table Pro, where I teach you how to become a better 40k player. And you're listening to 40k Stat Center.
From Slaughterfest to the Summer Slaughter, Warhammer players are nothing if not consistent and unimaginative in their naming conventions. The Basement Wargamers presented Summer Slaughter over the weekend, a 64-person ITC major event in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, using the Nova Mission Pack. TJ Lanigan gave us the lowdown.
So over the weekend, I had the opportunity to go to the BWG Summer Slaughter event. It was 64 players in Gamer Haven, which was one of the best GTs I've been to in a while as far as like comfortability and like options and what was going on there. The terrain was great. Uniform over all the tables, which I like a lot. They had their own built-in restaurant. The chairs were nice and accommodating. They were great on prize support, some of the best prize support I've gotten all year. It was a lot of fun. I'd like to thank Sam Lucci for running the event. He was the head TO. He did a fantastic job. Would definitely come again next year, and everybody else should definitely head out there if they can.
So a number of ITC East Coast names showed up, including Nick Nanavati running his first attempt at Tau.
I've been playing Gene Stealer Cult for the past few months, getting ready for ETC. I've taken to the 4 majors in the past couple months since I started. And then coming up, I have ESC and ETC in the next 2 weeks, and then Nova shortly thereafter. So I didn't really want to just take Gene Stealer Cult again, although I could probably have used the practice. I just wanted something different and a change of pace. So I decided to YOLO bring a Tau army. Tau is something I've kind of never really experimented with, so it was a bit of a learning process for me as well. And I kind of just wanted to challenge myself and see what I could do with an army I've literally never played before. This GT wasn't going to be large enough, even though it was a major, to really impact my ITC score. So I figured, what's the worst that happens if I scrub out and don't win? So, yeah, that's pretty much why I brought Tau.
Let's take a look at what the Brown Magic brought in his bag of tricks.
Sure. So Nick Nanavati brought a Tau battalion with a Cold Star running 3 missile pods, ATS, and 2 shield drones. He also had a Cadre Fireblade with an additional 2 shield drones, Dark Strider, 3 5-man strike squads, 2 of them with marker lights, all 3 running 2 shield drones. He then had a Tau Outrider with another Cold Star Commander with 3 missile pods, ATS, and 2 shield drones, and a second Cadre Fireblade also with 2 shield drones. He then had 3 units, 2 of 7 shield drones, 1 of 6, and finally he had a Tau Vanguard with another Cold Star with 3 missile pods, ATS, and 2 shield drones, a third Fireblade with 2 shield drones, and 3 Riptides, each with heavy burst cannons and SMS. 2 ran ATS and target lock, the other ran ATS and velocity tracker, and he topped it all off with 3 fire sight marksmen.
Not too shabby. I love how with Tau builds, everything old is new again. So those missile commanders, you saw those last summer a little bit. I think the Russian guy, the best performing Tau list at the ETC last year ran missile pod commanders. He was like the only guy doing it there, and it never got picked up on. As well as broadsides. He was running solo broadsides. It was very strange. But anyway, a lot of this stuff is all things that have been tried in the past and just sort of get recycled into new lists as things go round and round.
For sure, and I really like the 2 shield drone tags that we're starting to see more and more of, with Richard Siegler's lists and Richard Martin, who I believe kind of took it from Siegler as well. People aren't afraid anymore of the kill more scenario that the shield drones used to cause. They're able to properly remove wounds here and there when they need to. And it seems to be working out for people.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to cut to some clips, actually, of Nick talking about this list. Obviously, I'm sure it's well documented on his various channels. Nights at the Game Table, I do believe. But he actually talks about the drones. In this case, it was a Nova format mission. And he talks a little bit about why that makes a difference.
To make sure I had options to play around the giant Nova Ls, and I wanted to use and abuse the Nova mission intricacies as much as possible. So I took a ludicrous amount of two-man drone units. I think I had 9 units of 2 shield drones. I figured the 2-mans would be really useful for screening out Gene Stealer Cult or other deep striking things without really committing anything. And it'd be a real inefficient way for firepower to kill them, especially against like knights or opposing tower, things like that, where you have to shoot an entire Avenger Gatling cannon or a heavy burst cannon at a 2-man drone unit. That's got to feel pretty bad. Aside from that, I took 3 Cold Stars with missile pods, 3 missile pods and an ATS. They were shockingly good. I've always been a big fan of missile pod commanders. I think they're highly underrated, but they really did shine, and I was really proud of those guys. So those are probably the most interesting parts of my list as far as Tau. As far as any singular MVP unit, I don't really think I have one. My army is pretty much just 3 commanders, 3 Riptides, and 3 drones, so all 3 of those units were like integral to my success. My 7 Marker-like characters, they weren't spectacular, but they did their job. They did what they need to. Fire Warriors are utter garbage, although they did get the last kill on Ganyo's Knight, the last wound. So I'm proud of those guys. I think the army just functioned as a whole. There's no singular unit that really shines. I guess if I had to pick one, I really liked my Cold Star. It was 3 missiles and an ATS. About half as expensive as a Riptide, doesn't shoot nearly as much, but it's such a reliable and consistent kind of damage that it's something that the army really needs.
Nick would go 4-1, taking 3rd place, with his only loss coming to the eventual event winner. Now, our little birds did tell us that Nick wasn't very happy with his fish goat man and made sure everyone around him knew it, though not because it did not perform. And lucky for him, it didn't, because it sounds like he would have been stuck holding the bag.
I guess one of the
for the
greater
good
that happened to me this
Here's
weekend
Nick's
was
final
basically
thoughts.
all weekend I whined about how I wasn't enjoying playing Tau. I mean, it wasn't bad. My games were fun. My opponents are fantastic. They were great sports all across the board. But every game I ran to the middle of the table, I set up camp, and I shot people. And it worked or it didn't. It worked more often than not as well. But that's just not the way I like to play 40k. I like a more dynamic, maneuverable army that can assault stuff, use tricks, all that stuff that Tau just doesn't do. So whining about playing Tau and how I was never going to do it again, it's just not for me, not my style. I ended up getting 3rd place. Luckily, Ganyo, who won 1st, also won best overall. So they gave him that. TJ, who got 2nd, got bumped up to 1st. I, who won 3rd, got bumped up to 2nd. And Louis Stolberg, who got 4th, bumped up to 3rd. And the prize for 3rd place, which I dodged, was a fully painted Tau arm, or a fully boxed Tau arm.
Wow. Winning an entire Tau army. That sounds terrible. I hope Lewis can handle carrying that awful load around his neck.
Heavy weighs the mantle, you know?
Mm-hmm. Anyway, going into round 5, 4 players were undefeated at the tournament. Andrew, the Poltergeist Ganyo, with his knights, and obviously overcosted Custodes grav tanks.
Mm-hmm.
Scott Horace, with his Knights and Imperial Guard. Chad Layton, repping the Necrons. And TJ Lanigan, with his terribly boring, and seen oft too many times on this podcast, Demons with Thousand Suns and Death Guard.
TJ and Andrew would end up coming out on top in their respective matches, and Andrew would take the event due to his victory points. We've looked at TJ's list a number of times, and you can randomly click on essentially any event on 40kstats.com to see it, or check out BCP. TJ did give us the pleasure of breaking down both his most difficult game and the finals.
Most interesting game of the weekend was against Carl and his Slaanesh faction list. He ran a really interesting chaos list. 9 Slaanesh bikers with 3 obliterators and a possessed star, which is not something that you usually see on any of the tables. We managed to both make it to the 4-0 bracket and have to play each other at the first round of the second day. So that was quite a good showing of a game for his list. Did a great job, played it very tactically. Had some unfortunate dice rolls that just caused the game to kind of slide in my favor. But other than that, I mean, he played it very, very well. It was definitely something that kind of made my head turn a little bit, kind of looking a little more into some things that he ran in his list. So kudos to him. Last round of the day was probably my toughest round. And it was against Chad Layton and his Necrons. He runs a very, modernized Necron list. Mech is the way that a lot of armies have started to go, and that is definitely heavy mech army he's running. 3 Doomsday Arcs, with 3 of the Flyers, and he's running some Tomb Blades for some anti-horde protection. So it was very crucial that I deal with these flyers as quick as humanly possible. So turn 1, I almost killed one. I got a little unlucky with my last 2 spells. They just didn't go off. So he was able to do the pick a point on the map within 24 inches of all 3 of the flyers and basically try to do 3d3 mortal wounds to everything, which is really rough. Thankfully, round 2, I was able to kill all 3 of them, so definitely helped out.
Maybe we'll finally see that drastic change to TJ's list. And now for something completely different, let's take a second to look at what Andrew Gagno ran.
Andrew Gagno, he ran a super heavy detachment featuring Household Crass Knights, which were comprised of a Knight Crusader with the Avenger Gatling Cannon and Rapid Fire Battle Cannon, of course, and 2 Armiger Warglaves.
Hello.
Spearhead detachment of Adeptus Custodes featuring a Shield Captain on Dawn Eagle jet bike and 3 Caladius Grav tanks, and a battalion detachment of Vostroyan Astra Militarum with a tank commander featuring the Relic Battle Cannon because it was an Emperor's Fist tank company, a tank commander who was the Warlord, and 4 10-dude units of infantry squads.
Yeah, it's a very similar list to what we've been seeing out of the UK the last, say, 3 or 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
Really, the big change here is the Armiger Warglaves, adding those in, which would get you access to the Crast tactic, the re-rolling hits in close combat.
Yeah.
He does lose out on the -1 to hit on the Caladius Grav tanks and the second tank commander that most of those lists over there run.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I mean, it's a pretty solid leaf blower.
Absolutely. And, I mean, Armiger Warglaves, came in that box set. People probably have them kicking around, and they seem like fun.
They do, but anyone I've ever seen play them up until now has basically said they're utter garbage. So really glad to see that someone actually made them work.
Absolutely. And who other than one Andrew Gagno? Some say the nicest man in 40k, as we're recording, of course. The audience doesn't know this, but he hasn't gotten back to us.
Now, we tried desperately to get some insight from this quote-unquote nicest guy in 40k on his list and the event in general, but he ghosted Val harder than friggin' Casper. It was like the aftermath of a bad Tinder date, with Val just DMing the guy over and over to no avail. Luckily for us, we were also able to reach Gagno's opponent in the finals, Scott Horace, in case the ghost with the most did let us down, and he was able to provide us insight on just how it all went down from his point of view.
Hi Val, thanks for having me. I wouldn't say that I have a extremely unique or special approach to this list. It's just a generally decent good all-arounder. It's got a melee threat, a base of fire, and board control through the guardsmen. I really chose the knights for the melee threat because I appreciated that they could present a long-range melee threat. The Gallant can charge targets up to 32 inches away with Landstrider if I need him to, and then the Warglaves typically follow up close after that. Then that's followed by some board control for guardsmen and a base of fire off of the tank commanders and manticores. My MVP for the weekend is definitely my Knight Gallant. I recently switched the Knights attachment back in after running Bulgrins for a while. I felt like the Knights give me the initiative in the game way more than the Bulgrins. On the first 4 games, I was able to more or less decide to turn 1 charge with the Gallant, and he killed some very, very critical things on the top of the first turn in my first 4 games. The one that really, really sticks out to me there was on game 3, he ended up throwing smasher guns into a relic shock attack gun and killing it on the top of turn 1 before it had the ability to fire. Shock attack guns are awful for tank commanders because they have no invuln and they do tremendous amounts of damage to them, so that would have been huge if it was able to fire. So, highlights from top table. I was looking at Andrew's list before the game and thinking, man, this thing outmaneuvers me, outshoots me, and punches just about as well. And it's difficult for me to engage him in melee with Caladius Grav tanks. I felt like I needed a pretty big misplay from Andrew to really get in the game. He never gave me that. So he was able to put me away pretty methodically. One funny thing that stands out is I was playing really cagey with the Gallant, trying to hide in between the elves. Either on turn 2 or 3, the Crass Crusader lined up a shot on the Gallant and did 23 wounds through to it with Huntsman's Mark, 6 of which came from a heavy stubber. So 2 failed heavy stubber saves for 6 damage. So that was pretty awesome.
Wait a second. This just in. Andrew Gagnon is actually a saint and just really busy and away on business. Here he is with his take on his list and his games.
Hey Val, Andrew Gagnon with you here. Thank you guys for including me in this to run through the questions you guys had for me. This last week in the GT, what was special about my list and the approach that I kind of took to it was I haven't been playing much this last year, so I wanted something probably a little more straightforward that would just reward general good decision making and play, and also approach the meta, which I think is shifting to a lot less body heavy, with lots of mobile firepower that was pretty strong, and just benefit from good rough strategy without all the finesse that I might have had in past years when I was potentially playing a little more. So it has several threat elements that can't just be alpha struck off the board, for instance, if you're going second, because that can be really big right now with the flyer match and a few others. So I think that's what is special about my approach to the list, and probably not too special from what a lot of people are doing right now. So I would say my MVP unit, and everyone's going to think I'm going to say the Caladius. They were amazing, they were long range, they were mobile, they had all of that going for them. But I'd probably say one of my favorite main units was actually, oddly enough, the Warglaive. It almost had the character rule because no one wanted to waste time targeting it. It was really useful for flanking. People kind of left them alone, and then with the crash trait, rerolling hits, they were actually pretty nasty in combat. I actually spent a lot of time talking with Nick Nanavati, who does a coaching service, after the event about it, and he was interested in it as well. So I would say the top table featured 4 of them, so they can't be all bad. And I know he had some interest in doing a segment on it in his coaching sessions if there was enough interest. So if you guys like him, reach out to him. I think he'll be interested to hear from you. So I would say the highlight of the top table match was, 1, there being 4 Warglaives on the table to begin with. 2, my opponent Scott Horace was a really great guy. Had a very fun game with him. I think one thing that was most telling is that, you know, our list may have been different, but they both had a very similar approach. They had enough bodies, 40 to 60 between us, that would let you play against the GSC match, but they were really based on fairly durable, consistent, long-range firepower to kind of move around in the background, pick your angles, and pick people apart. And I think that was kind of the telling scenario that both of us made it to the finals like that. I really would have liked to see how it went up against TJ, who also was undefeated. But the turning point in the final match was probably just getting first and the Caladius outranging him and kind of outclassing the battle tanks. So it was kind of the same approach, but with a little bit superior unit. I think the main thing I'd like to highlight is a big thank you to Basement Wargamers, especially Sam Lucidi from Beast Coast, who kind of put on this event for all of us. I'm not positive if it was the first year. I know it's the first year that I'd heard about it, and I'd went to this one that Sam had run, and I had an absolute blast. It was an amazing store. I mean, they fit 64, I want to say, 40k players and an AOS event in the store without feeling crowded, with great terrain. in a gaming store that also had food and was well run and on time. So hats off to those guys. I had a blast. It was great to get out and see friends, even if I kind of last minute audibled into it. So if you guys have a chance, check it out in future years. It was a really, really great time.
There you have it. Grats to Andrew on the win. Let's do one of them dare bumps.
Tournament news.
I'm Lawrence Baker.
And this is the B-Bone from Tabletop Tactics.
You're listening to 40k Stat Center.
And that takes us to the GK Open, the Uno, held at the venerable Game Castle Game Store, the White Castle of hobby venues, where both were once home to greatness. White Castle being in its namesake movies, and Game Castle being the BAO. They are now wretched hives of scum and villainy, one preyed upon by the likes of one of our next event's TOs, Anthony D'Amore, and the other by In-N-Out. Short-time listeners of the show may remember Anthony from last week's podcast, where he waxed poetic about Primaris Death Watch lists, and then savagely tore down the borderline angelic Paul McKelvey from Best Coast Pairings.
I'm still recovering from that. Please note, we do not condone any throwing of shade on our podcast unless it is our own, as the Falcon is an absolute diva and cannot help himself.
Ha, ha, ha. I mean, you're not wrong. Now, luckily, John Feuerelm, a far more respectable member of the 40k community, who would never slander the name of one Mr. McKelvey, and the co-TO of the GK Open, did give us his take on the event.
This last weekend in July, in the past, was the weekend where the Bay Area Open was being held. And as you may know, the Bay Area Open was moved to the Kubla Khan Gaming Convention at the beginning of summer. That's to give it more space to expand. In fact, this year, Reese and Frankie approached me last October and asked if I would run the 40K, the Age of Sigmar GT to complement the 40K GT for the Bay Area Open. Then about 6 months ago, Seth Amston of Game Castle approached me and asked if I would run a tournament to replace the Bay Area Open, and that is how the Game Castle Open was born. So this year at the Game Castle Open, the Uno, as we called it, and they say that nature hates a vacuum. So when the Bay Area Open was moved, there's actually several GTs that tried to fill this same weekend. In particular, Slaughterfest down in Bakersfield, I believe, was being held this weekend, and they did get themselves on the calendar and start advertising a little bit before we got the GK Open up and ready to go. Because of that, a lot of the Southern California players that have frequently traveled up to the Bay Area for tournaments actually went to Slaughterfest. And so this time our meta was mostly local Northern California players, as well as a few Sacramento players and some far Northern California players north of the Bay Area. I started Firehead Productions about 3 years ago to handle tournaments in our local scene. There was basically nobody really running Warhammer tournaments here in the greater Bay Area in Northern California. There were certainly plenty of tournaments out in the Sacramento area and some in the East Bay and the Oakland area, but in the South Bay here and in the San Francisco Peninsula, there were no real tournaments being held. So I started up Firehead Productions. We do 40K and Age of Sigmar tournaments. We have about 75 RTTs, and the GK Open was our 6th GT under Firehead Productions. And so mostly Northern California, though we are available to run tournaments wherever, whenever. Just give me a contact through Facebook. Thank you very much, and good day.
As John mentioned, the Uno was a 41-player ITC GT in California, an excellent feat when you consider that Slaughterfest occurred only a short 5-hour ski trip away and held 100. Now, while White Castle had Harold and Kumar as its unlikely heroes, Game Castle had Jonathan Blake and Bridger Hahn. They had some great things to say about the Uno.
Well, the event was for Jeff. It was amazing to see the community come together, not just players in the tournament, but the crowd full of friends that came. Jeff was and still is a huge part of the local community here in the Bay Area. and someone who I look up to, so I was extremely proud to be part of the event. Let's see. For this event, there was mostly a lot of middle table heroes here, as there was the Slaughterfest going on at the same time in California, so just keep that in mind. But I think everyone had a great time. All my games were amazingly fun. I think the TOs were actually disappointed that they didn't get to yellow card anyone.
This was Game Castle's first year running a big tournament like this. So this was the first Game Castle Open, and everybody had a blast. We had pretty good turnout. It was like 41 players. And from what I hear, they're looking to do this every year. And they're looking to grow it to maybe even a major or a convention or something. But it was really fun to see my buddy John Blake take first alongside me, undefeated. And we saw him put on the custodian cap, which was pretty funny. And his game one, he beat Brian Pullen in like a buzzer beater, down to the wire game. That was cool to hear about.
Now, once again, please note that we are not saying that Jonathan or Bridger were high at the event, or that they went on a drug-fueled weekend of debauchery with Neil Patrick Harris, despite what pictures of the event would have you believe. This is just a series of terrible comparisons. Game Castle, I hear, is an excellent venue and does not smell anywhere near as much of grease and despair as White Castle does.
Both players would go undefeated at the event, with Jonathan winning Best General based on victory points. Let's see what old Johnny Blake brought to the GK Open. We have a battalion detachment of Drukhari. Of course, the Prophets of Flesh were in the house, a Homunculus and Urian Rakarth. Those rascals were leading the battalion. Next, we had 3 units of 5 racks, and then 2 big bad units of grotesques. I'm told approximately 9 of them in each. Then he had a spearhead detachment. This one was Craft Worlds, led by a Warlock Skyrunner, and featuring 3 fire prisms in the heavy support slots, one of them carrying the crystal targeting matrix. Finally, rounding it all out, we had an air wing detachment, also of the Eldari Craft Worlds Persuasion, Laytalk, of course, and it was 3 Crimson Hunter Exarchs with 2 Star Cannons apiece for an exact 2,000 points. What do you think about that, Falcon?
Well, this list is everything that I hate to see about the game. It involves Eldar and Dark Eldar, and that's really all it needs to make me just absolutely furious.
I do enjoy, it's not just, Air Dari. It's got at least some fun, I really do like the Prophets of Flesh stuff. I think they're really, really beat sticky and really hard to dig out of stuff. And I always have a lot of fun playing against it. And it's not just a dozen planes. That's nice.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the fact that he is going with the, 18 grotesques is, I wouldn't call it unique, but it is an excellent list. Don't get me wrong. I just really hate everything with pointy ears.
That's fair. I mean, that is completely fair.
All right, approach to my list. I guess I try to look for lose-lose situations for my opponent. If you're shooting at grotesques, then you're leaving my firepower on the board, and I try to take your tools away to deal with me. If you're shooting at craft world vehicles, then you're going to get run over and lose map control. I try to capitalize on whatever decision my opponent makes. Usually shooting at either of those things doesn't feel good. Game pace is also a big factor in my matchups. I tend to deny a lot of points despite how terrible it is for our tournament score. If I play Tau or maybe another gun line, I need to pick at my opponent early game while staying safe, tying up the score, and then have big rounds towards the end. This allows me to kind of win bad matchups by running onto objectives with units that are hard to kill in the later stages of the game. If I play a horde army like Tyranids or Chaos, I'm usually trying to get into combat as soon as possible, get in as many phases as possible, just to get through all those wounds and limit their control. MVP unit this weekend is Grotesque for sure. They're definitely the unit people don't know how to really deal with. I also make a lot of 4-up invulns. They're amazingly resilient. Let's see, without even mentioning the stat line, it's the amount of wounds that get lost in them not carrying over after a model dies that makes them the best. They also almost never lose combat. 9 grotesques, 45 attacks, re-rolling wounds will finish off a knight pretty easily.
Meanwhile, Bridger came to Game Castle with a list similar to the one he's brought to numerous tournaments in the last few months, including the BAO. Now, Bridger here, he brought a Custodes Outrider detachment with a Shield Captain on Dawn Eagle jetbike, a Palace Grav attack tank, 2 units of 4 Virtus Praetors, and then a Spearhead detachment carrying on that Pokeball Assassin, Constantine Valdor, aka Trajan Valoris, aka the greatest Custody of all time, a Vexillus Praetor with a Storm Shield and Vexilla Magnifica, and 3 Caladius Grav tanks.
Now it looks like a good old time.
It does. I really enjoy Bridger's list. It did him very well at BAO. I believe his only loss was to Jeff in Control Robinson. In what was what at least Bridger said was a game that was going to go down to who went first, because they both were running that triple Caladius goodness. It's good to see that he performed so well here at Game Castle. I'm always excited when my Golden Boys do well.
The list that I ran was pretty similar to my Bay Area Open list. There were a couple changes, but for the most part, it worked on the same premise of the Caladius Castle sort of sitting back and being a clock that the enemy has to sort of fight through, and the units of bikes kind of run forward and apply a bunch of pressure, a bunch of board control, pick up units on objectives. They're obsec, so they'll grab objectives. They're almost unchargeable because they protect each other. If you charge one, then I'll stooping dive with the other, and not much can survive 4 bikes on the charge when they fight first. So it's a pretty solid list because you kind of have to deal with the bikes. If you don't, you lose the game. And while you're dealing with the bikes, the 3 Caladiuses are just like tearing your army apart. And at the end of the game, you won't have much that can deal with tanks. So that's kind of how it works. In terms of MVP units, my list is all incredibly consistent, and there's not many units in it. But definitely this tournament, Constantine Valdor really pulled through. In Game 4 against Gene Stealer Cult, I had Kingslayered my opponent's Patriarch Warlord, which was arguably a terrible mistake. But he was hiding the Patriarch in the building like he should, so that nothing could really get to him. All my bikes were dead, and it was just Constantine and the Caladiuses left. And Constantine charged into the building and murdered the Patriarch and everybody around him over 2 turns of combat. And it was just, he did what he does. He's my only way into buildings, and he tore him down.
My top table match was with Jake Nelson. He's an amazing player, a great guy. I learn something new every time I play him. Unfortunately, it's always in the final round where one of us is getting kicked out of a good placing. He played a list with 3 Caladius and 3 tank commanders, which is just brutal. We had precious cargo on Spearhead with decent terrain, but not nearly enough to hide everything. I got extremely lucky and got first turn, so I could whittle down his gun line early on. We had a pretty slow start to the game, though, with some lackluster shooting. But Jake by far had some much colder rolls during this game than I did. There was no real turning point in our game since it was so close all the way through. We had secondaries perfectly maxed out by turn 4 or 5. We made a lot of mistakes, but never failed to capitalize on each other for some reason. It came down to primaries with only 2 or 3 Coven models touching a Wyvern and mulching some guardsmen, and a Fire Prism sniping a single guardsman for the win. A 1-point win, actually.
My top table game was against this really cool Eldar Soup list. It played around dropping your leadership with debuffs and a couple psychic powers that could really just tear you apart with mortal wounds. But I went first, and I was able to pick up a Hemlock and a Fire Prism every turn pretty consistently with the Caladiuses. And he had to deal with the bikes. 1 bike out of each unit survived his turn 1, and I auto-passed one and CP rerolled the leadership on the other one. And that was pretty much it. It's pretty hard to deal with my bikes. Even if just one of them makes it to you, now you have to put a lot of shooting into them. They're obsec, they got me bonus. And then my castle's untouched, so turn 3, I still have 3 Caladius, and you have no tanks and no planes. So it was kind of a brutal matchup, but it was a really cool army.
And that does it for our coverage on the GK Open. Really big congratulations to Jonathan and Bridger for putting together a wonderful performance. And a big thanks to the event organizers. As Bridger mentioned, the event did have a lot to do with recognizing Jeff Robinson and everything he did for the community. And a big shout out to Israel Sanchez, who actually won Best Overall due to his gorgeously painted army. Let's cut to another bump.
Tournament news.
Scary here from Scardcast, and you are listening to Stats Center.
And now we fly to my birthplace, Haligonia, Halifax, Nova Scotia. Home of the world's best donaires, the world's best bird, that'd be this guy, and Gork's Grand Bash. Hosted at the Brewster's Bar and Grill right next to the Dollarama, where you can get all the toy turtles you need for your Astra Militarum army, Gork's was a 29-player ITC event. We got in touch with Todd Wall, one of the event organizers, to get the lowdown.
Gork's Grand Bash was held in Halifax, Nova Scotia. This was our first Grand Tournament event and had 29 players attend. The event was inspired by a pair of our local gamers' desire to have a Grand Tournament, Ben Pelgier and Brian Strongman. They both got the GT bug from attending the Mork event in April. I am very focused on growing the local community, so it was natural for me to become involved. I personally have 12 tables worth of terrain and mats, and that's still growing. Brian worked hard to develop an additional 7 tables worth, so it was quite easy for us to stock the tables properly. The meta was heavily vehicle focused with a few lists that bucked the trends. We counted on the Mork's core of gamers coming from New Brunswick, but also drew Joseph from CTC. The event went great. Most of the players knew the game quite well, which freed me to spend time split between a couple new gamers and building more terrain. The only issue we had was a major list change that had to be done leading up to the event. There's always things to improve, and drawing out more of Halifax gamers is on the top of my list. To do that, I am setting up another 2-day event for the end of November. Details still need to be firmed up on that.
Todd was referring to the Mork's Maritime Open that happened last May. It is really great to see Warhammer growing in all these smaller places. After 2 full days of just shy of 30 Maritimers sitting in a bar playing Warhammer, things of course got silly. Drinks flowed, and the tournament would end up with Joe Medema's Eldar beating Nathan Chow to take the crown.
You want to give it another go at reading a list for once, Val?
Joe Medema, Gork's Grand Open. He was running an air wing detachment of Craft World's LA Talk. What the? 3 Crimson Hunter Exarchs with 2 star cannons each. And then he had a Spearhead detachment. Okay. And it had an Archon and 3 Ravagers. And it was Cabal of the Black Heart. Well, I guess that's pretty cool. And then next we had a battalion detachment of a Laytok with an Autok Skyrunner and a Farseer Skyrunner. And then under the troops, he had 10 Rangers and 9 Storm Guardians. Okay. And then fast attack, he had 8 Wind Riders with scatter lasers. Cool. And heavy support, 2 of those lovely Night Spinners. And then finally a Wave Serpent. All right.
You know, it's a list, and I do believe one thing was missed. He did also have a Warlock Skyrunner in the list, but, I mean, still, you know, it's, once again, Eldar. Definitely something that I despise.
Not too bad. I think both of these guys, I'm apologizing. You know, I'm an apologist for both of the Eldar lists we've seen today. Only 3 flyers, showing restraint, not just all the flyers. I mean, not everyone was running Alan's list at Slaughterfest. That's nice.
No, or Brian Hunters.
I
know I've said before that I'm just not a big fan of the Knife Ears, but, you know, kudos to Joe for not sharking it too much when he brought it over to that small maritime city.
Exactly. Why don't we kick it over to Joe and see what he had to say?
I had an absolutely amazing time at the Gork's Grand Bash. It was a fantastically run event and hosted at a great venue, which was Brewster's Bar and Grill in Bedford. The TOs were Todd Wall, Brian Strongman, and Ben Pelsner, and they did an absolutely amazing job of putting together a top-class 2-day event with a great selection of players from all across Ontario, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia, Canada. So as a player in 8th edition, I've really shifted from using orcs early on right into Inari Eldar and did very well with them in the ITC 2018. So it was a pretty hard shift moving to the new FAQs and rules to using much more of a streamlined Eldar or Eldari mixed list. What ended up happening is this list did perform well. There's certainly not optimized for many of the hard-hitting lists out there. Like, it doesn't do well against a Nick Natavati GSC or a TJ Lanigan Chaos list, but it is have its highlights. It definitely has its strengths and a few weaknesses, which was fun. I definitely would have to say the Night Spinners did well for me, taking out a lot of the small units on objectives, or even taking out vehicles that are T7 or less. And they even put off about 15 wounds on knights throughout one of the match too. So my day one opponents ended up going very well. It was definitely a slog through those first 3 matches, but they, in terms of overall how the games went, they certainly tilted in my favor throughout the overall match, and that wasn't a problem. Day 2 definitely had a different ring to it. You could tell that the two Game 4 and Game 5, Game 4 being against an undefeated opponent as well, and then Game 5 being against a 3-1. It was an uphill battle, and I had to work really hard for it. In essence, Game 4 on day 1, saw a very tight Gilliman gunline list with lots of dreads. A lot of hard things to get through with not a whole lot of strength 8, firepower coming out of my list. So that was where I had to play the objectives and play the mission much harder than actually killing things, and that's why I chose secondaries that much more focused on ground control and board control rather than killing. So the final match, round 5, day 2, was against a great guy by the name of Nathan Chow. He's an absolutely brilliant person and just a fantastic player. He, to his credit, hasn't been playing competitively for a long time, but he just has one of those minds and abilities to grasp, read a full codex, memorize it, know it all. And, he just really understood the game much better than most players would after years of playing. Even, myself playing competitively for a while, he just was right up there despite his inexperience. He played a very hard-hitting Imperial Guard brigade with a lot of really neat tools that, toolboxes that you wouldn't see at first glance when you look at the list. But I had a lot of fun. He had a demolition truck in there, he had Elysian drop troops, he had the typical tank commanders and all those things that hit hard. And I'd have to say that the overall game was fantastic, and Nathan was an exceptional opponent, easy to get along with, easy to talk to, and it went really well. Finishing up on Game 5, I'd have to say the turning point was when Nathan was starting to run back on the clock, and I still had a lot of time, and he chose to do a lot of things that essentially were not needed. They didn't really change the game state, and that put him on his back foot for time. So I ended up clocking him on turn 4, although I did have a moderate lead anyway leading into that turn. It kind of let me go from about a 25 point to about a 37 point, being able to score those last 2 turns uninhibited. He had done quite a bit of damage to things that didn't matter either, which allowed me to kind of keep board control, recon, those types of things, and score. Lastly, I'd just really like to thank you guys for taking up the game with 40k Stat Center, really allowing us to check in on those events every week and staying on top of the pulse. I just had a fantastic time at Gork's Grand Bash in this July, and of course their sister event, the Morks Grand Bash, is in New Brunswick, and it'll be hosted mid-May. And just a quick shout out for them. And then of course we have Warzone Montreal coming up in September, and then our very own Canadian Tabletop Championship Gaming Convention, CTCGC, will be returning this May 1, 2, 3, 2020, and we're expanding from 20 events to about 30, and we're hoping to break the 500 person mark for this gaming convention. So it's going to be a ton of fun, and you'll start seeing a lot of that coming out in the next month or two as we ramp up our planning and development cycle. Cheers.
Now, Joe was not the only undefeated player at Gork's. Yet again, a Necron player hit that beautiful T-whip and went 4-0-1. This time, Brian Strongman came out with a very, very unique list. Melee Necrons.
Overachieving Underachiever of the Week!
So, I've been playing 40k for about 20 years now. Started in 3rd, but didn't get into the competitive scene until about 7th edition, the Twilight days. And then the ITC I jumped right into at the launch of 8th edition. So this is my 4th GT that I've played in. My first GT with Necrons. And the list kind of really functions around Cutluck the World Killer, which is a kind of an unknown model. He has no official model, and the dynasty he hails from has no dynastic codes attributed to it. It's a Forge World model. So when you pick him up, you can use any dynastic code that you want. So since his ability is a 12-inch aura of being able to assault after you advance, obviously you're going to want to use some sort of close combat elements to get the most out of such powerful ability. But of course it's keyed into the infantry and also those that share a dynasty. So right off the top, you're eliminating Treyarch Praetorians, Wraiths, Scarabs, and a couple of the other Forge World Beast models, since they don't have the infantry keyword, even though they're really awesome at being in close combat. So obviously that leaves you with two choices, either Flayed Ones or Lich Guard. Flayed Ones, you're going to be looking for those big blobs of 20 to really kind of get the full benefit of your resurrection protocols, but 20 Flayed Ones is close to 100 points more than the, say, 9 or 10 Lich Guard that I used. And of course the Lich Guard have extra toughness, a better save, they have an invulnerable save, and they actually have AP on their attacks. So at that point it's pretty much a no-brainer what you're gonna kind of lean towards. And of course Cutluck himself is 200 points, so you really, if you're going to go with him, you want to invest as much as you can in that whole close combat element. So went for the 3 full blobs of Lich Guard, 2 Sword and Board, 1 Scythe for dealing damage, Sword and Board of course for absorbing as much damage as they can. And the list pretty much functions around being able to get that high mobility, everything's flying around the table, ignoring terrain, capping objectives with the Immortals, Engineers with the Immortals, because really I don't need them to do anything. I very rarely shoot with them, maybe just take a couple pot shots here and there, but they're specifically designed just to kind of grab table quarters while the Lich Guard do their thing. It is also a very kind of hero hammer centered list, so characters are pulling a lot of the heavy weight. The overlords with their big scythes are there to take down vehicles. You're not able to screen that effectively, and if you do screen, I do want the screen, because this list kind of functions on not necessarily killing things in my turn, so it kind of lowered my score a bit because I wasn't often getting kills in my turn. Maybe like 50% of the time, but I'm looking for the kills in the opponent's turn. So wrapping the opponent up in my turn by not engaging them fully, not going for the kill on the unit, wrapping them, and then killing them in my opponent's turn. So basically preventing my opponent from shooting me as best I can through consolidations, pile-ins, giving units the bad touch, all that kind of thing. So as far as the list MVP goes, it has to go to Cutluck, of course, because of his aura. He's 200 points of not do anything other than stand 12 inches away from everything that I have on the table as best I can. Anriker, the Traveler, was absolutely critical too, giving the +1 attack aura when I needed it, but also being able to take over enemy vehicles and just kind of take pot shots at things that I can't actually engage with this list. And then I guess of course the Lich Guard, they do their work by absorbing the enemy's gunfire. And then as far as toughest matchup, any kind of matchup where I'm dealing with flat 2 damage or D3 damage is an absolute pain for me to deal with. 3-up invulns aren't exactly what I'm known for making successes on from anyone that I play on a regular basis. They know that they can pretty much chew through the Lich Guard even with a 3-up invuln, but usually I only lose 1. So the second one in a fair number of my games, I actually went through playing just off of 2 units of Lich Guard instead of 3, because I'd always lose 1 on turn 1. As far as game highlights, I'd say it was my game 5 against a very, very good player. He was playing an Eldari Soup, so he had the Alatok Wing Detachment, some Harlequins in there, and lots of Venoms with Dark Eldar Warriors. So he was pretty much able to go wherever he wanted, whenever he wanted, and do whatever he wanted. So in that regard, we had very similar lists, very high mobility. So once he started asking some key questions, and I explained to him what my list does pre-game, he basically castled his army up into a corner behind some wood features, which of course means that if I was to charge them, it would deduct 2 inches from my charge. So he was really kind of castling up to prevent any kind of turn 1 shenanigans, and then not too worried about capturing objectives, of course, because he could spring out 20 inches from his table corner there in every direction, grab objectives and things of that nature. So I went for a surprise on him, and instead of going for the turn 1 charge, because obviously it wouldn't benefit me in any way since everything flies and would just be able to escape, I actually used the Veil of Darkness to teleport to the other side of the table with a big blob of shield Lichguard and seize the priority objective on turn 1, which meant I had the Lichguard in his deployment zone holding the bonus point and also allowing me to get hold more pretty much straight from turn 1 until about turn 4, turn 5. So that single play right there single-handedly won me the game. So that was probably my favorite move, where that's kind of the focus of this list, not necessarily killing things, but grabbing objectives and going for that board control. The units, the assault units, are really there just to kind of get in the opponent's face and give them something to shoot at while I'm kind of running around being janky, cagey, and grabbing objectives.
Let's hit that bump.
Tournament news.
Hey everybody, I'm Paul Murphy from Forge the Narrative, and you're listening to 40k Stat Center.
Our last event this week was an absolute mystery until Monday morning. NATEFEST 2 was an ETC practice GT held in the city of Lisburn, Northern Ireland. Hosted by the Lisburn Gaming Club, 38 players brawled it out under a shadow of obscurity. With the help of a number of fans of the show, we were able to find the TO and captain of Northern Ireland, Nathan Cooper, on the dark web and get a lowdown on what happened, who won, and what's next.
Hi folks, my name is Nathan Cooper and I am the TO of NATEFEST 2019. I'm also the current captain of the Northern Irish ETC team, and we're really looking forward to going to Serbia to the ETC this year. The event is named after yours truly, myself, and I have been running it now this is the second year that we've been running this. The event was hosted in Lisburn, which is a small city outside Belfast, about 15 minutes down the road in Northern Ireland. The club that hosted the event and supplied all the terrain is called Lisburn Gaming Club. Lisburn Gaming Club is the largest club on the island of Ireland and has the largest 40k scene among other popular board games and tabletop games. Because our scene is pretty small, unfortunately that automatically means that we have very small events in any time that we actually do have an event. So we had to really push and create our own events in order to have them. And in such narcissistic fashion, I created one and named it after myself. So NATEFEST 2019 was an ETC 20-0 format, and we were playing 5 games over 2 days. 3 games on the first day and 2 games on the second day. We had a massive 38 players to join us in a great event, which is an amazing record for us in terms of events in Ireland. It's actually the biggest that we've ever had. Our scene is pretty small over here, so this was a massive deal to see so many people in one place all competing for the prize. Because our scene is so small, we're always behind the meta and we're always chasing it. Our scene has in around sort of 50-ish active players in Northern Ireland, but only 10 to 12 would sort of classify themselves as actually being competitive players that would follow metas and create anti-meta lists. These people would be the same people that would even refer to themselves as ETC players. So the event was pretty much a mixed bag with a whole range of abilities, interests and themes, which we all enjoyed. and I certainly enjoyed running it and hosting it. It was an absolute pleasure for the second year, and Lisburn Gaming Club, their committee was very supportive of the event. Just to touch on the terrain on the event, again, the terrain was created by myself to sort of replicate ITC and ETC sort of terrain. Lots of line of sight blocking, so people just didn't get blew off the table super early. The terrain was also supplied by Lisburn Gaming Club, and I really wanted to replicate the true ETC style format regarding the preset tables. So just regarding that, you would have extremely light tables with maybe 1 to 3 line of sight blocking pieces of terrain. You would have in around 4 medium with maybe 5 to 8 line of sight pieces which block line of sight, and then you would have, you know, the 2 heavy tables which would be extremely dense in terms of runes, and the bottom floors block the line of sight there. So it was a mixed bag. Every table was different, but towards the top tables I really wanted to replicate that, and we actually used the last year's ETC terrain which we bought at 2018 in Croatia and brought it home. So we put that really to use, especially in our practice games. In terms of things that I would do differently for next year, I think the hall was a bit small, so we'll maybe look at a different venue because we're looking to expand. There seems to be more and more interest every year with this event. Again, it's a massive umbrella of players we have in terms of player ability and skill, but there's still people who enjoy the fluff aspect and just an event in general to see everybody in one room. Timing wise, there were 3-hour rounds, and I wouldn't change any of that or anything. I think the majority of people had good time, and there was no real negative feedback or criticisms. A lot of it was positive, so it's not bad for our first year, and it's something we can all be extremely proud of. An interesting thing that happened in the first round was 11 games out of 19 went 20-0, which was incredible. I've never ever heard of that going on in any event, which was it's quite unique to hear that. Just to touch on our meta over here, the meta at this event, there was a lot of Imperial Knights backed up with guard, actual guard, which kind of made things easy as a TO, because the games are quick and they were easy, and there was a lot of mirror matches in the first round, so it was Knights versus Knights, which was quite interesting because, you know, those games go very, very quickly. But Val and Peter, I would just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about our event. There's going to be a NATEFEST 2020 next year in a bigger venue with hopefully more people coming to it. As I say, it's becoming a very good place for our hobby to grow in our small country. But no, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you guys. I know a lot of our guys love the show and love tuning in. There's just no show like it, so appreciate it very, very much, guys, and we wish you all the best. Thanks now. See ya. Bye.
Now, the eventual winner of the event was Michael McConkey, a more Irish name I've never heard. Also the only Genestealer Cults player to show up.
There's no coincidence there. I'm going to stumble through this Genestealer Cults list.
Well, you know, Val, if you're going to do it, you have to do it in that Irish accent, or you can give it to me.
No problem. Let me see if I can just queue up a little bit of... Let's see here. Oh, lovely. Okay, so we got something going here. Now we can find a little bit of list reading here for us all. Michael McConkey, running a 5CP battalion detachment. Genestealer Cults. Anointed Throng in the cult creed of the Bladed Cog. He was running an Abominant, as well as with the Insidious Mindworm and a Primus. In the troop slot, he had Acolyte Hybrids numbering in 16 strong, with Hand Flamers and a Leader. In the second troop slot, he had Brood Brothers Infantry, and then finally another 10-man unit of Brood Brothers Infantry. Under the Elite section, he ran the ever so clever Aberrants and 2 8-power pick-wielding strong units, backed up by a Biophagus, with the Alchemist Familiar, a Clamavus, and a Killer Morph. In a battalion detachment also of Genestealer cults, this time a Deliverance Brood surge with the cult of the Four-Armed Emperor. He had an Acolyte Icon Ward leading the bunch, along with a Patriarch actually leading the bunch. And then he had 3 troops, of course, because it's a battalion, which I already said. And they had Acolyte Hybrids, a Cult Icon, and with heavy rock saws. We had a couple of heavy rock saws in there. I think only one. And one larger unit. Nope, they're all the same. They're just 10-man units with 1 rock saw each. And then actually, finally, we have the battalion detachment of Tyranids, Genestealer cults here. Again, the cult of the Four-Armed Emperor, with a Magus, a Primus, and 3 Brood Brothers infantry squads, a Nexus, and good gravy, it's finally over.
Val, you did amazing. I really congratulate you on completely offending an entire country, possibly 1.5.
Yeah.
To be fair, those Rocksaw units, there were 5 Rocksaws in each squad.
I couldn't read and do that at the same time, much like most Irish.
If anyone's interested in seeing the list, it is not posted to 40kstats.com because we weren't able to get the full rundown of the event, just the eventual winner. If I do get that, I will upload them there. But you can always just send a message to Val or myself, or email me at the 40kstats.com messaging board, and I can send it your way.
Fantastic.
Now, do you want to get some clips here from Michael on how this list played out?
Absolutely. Now, I just want to say, he also described his accent as being more of a Liam Neeson accent, which is far too subtle for someone as ignorant as myself to pull off. So let's kick it over.
Also far more terrifying.
Yes. Mr. McConkey does have a very specific set of skills, which he'll now describe in great detail.
So in terms of the actual list, it's a pretty standard double Aberrant bomb Genestealer list with Acolyte rock saws backing it up. I suppose the one big change to most lists that would be out there, which would tend to be Twisted Helix or Cult, is the use of Bladed Cog as my cult creed for the Aberrant detachment. That was done because I was expecting to see a lot of Imperial Knights, Admech, and other Knights about the place. And so I thought the stratagem for, I think it's called Overthrow the Oppressors, for the Exploding Fives against Knights would be more useful than +1 strength on the Aberrants, which doesn't. In terms of MVP for the weekend, I suppose it's easy to say the Aberrants, the 2 Aberrant squads did a huge amount of heavy lifting for me, probably more so than the Acolyte squads did, partially because of the resilience. They were able to drop, wipe out, and take a punch back more than anything, more than the Acolyte squads could. Easy to say the Aberrants, but probably more so the Hypermorphs in the squads. Whenever you start getting an extra attack from a Biophagus, an extra attack from Might from Beyond, and you're all of a sudden swinging 10 times with exploding 6s or exploding 5s if you're against Imperium at damage 2, strength 10, it does a huge amount of work, especially against Knights. The 2 of them combined with an Abominant buffing them, Primus buffing them, and a Psychic Power on them, straight away I was wiping a Knight out with those 2 models alone, and the rest of the Aberrant squad were just trying to wrap and trap. Although I do have to give a special shout out to the Nexus. I'd never used the Nexus in my lists before, never felt I needed CP regen, tended to be running brigades and battalions, had enough CPs. This specific list though is very CP dependent with the various stratagems and combos, so I felt, especially given 6 CPs spent at the start of the game for Field Commander and Vigilus detachments and relics, that I just needed some way of getting those 2, 3 or 4 CPs back throughout the game. He's also fantastic for just leaving on a backfield objective because people just tend to ignore him, and he's just... Probably my toughest round was round 4. It's up against Daniel, who's on Team NI for ETC. He was running the Chaos Demons and Thousand Suns mixed Chaos lists, with the sort of standard stuff, I suppose, Plague Bearers, Pink Horrors, and then the double Zangors and numerous buff characters and smite characters. To me, on paper, it should be a loss most times for Gene Stealer cults against that. So much more board presence, a lot more resilience than certainly the Gene Stealers can muster, and the Zangors can hit just as hard as anything. And really the game came down to about 3 or 4 50-50 decisions that Daniel had to make. All I could do was put him in an awkward position and make him make a call. I got fortunate that he, from my point of view, I suppose, made the calls that benefited me most. Part of that was just his inexperience of playing against Gene Stealers. I know if we ever played again, it would probably be a resounding thumping for me, because he wouldn't make the same mistakes. He would understand better how the army plays. He's an absolutely cracking player and probably deserved to win the tournament, all bar just those little miscalculations that can really... At the top table game for round 5 is probably not too exciting, to be honest. It was up against Gareth, who's on Team Northern Ireland for ETC this year. He was running 4 Knights and the Rusty 17. To be honest, the game, I should be winning it 9 times out of 10. It's kind of bread and butter stuff for the Gene Stealer cults. So Gareth, fantastic player, and played the game as best he could, but his list just can't cope with the Gene Stealers, unfortunately. So my round 5, relatively straightforward. And I suppose the only thing to say really is, having to hold my hands up, I should have lost round 4 against Daniel. Possibly should have also lost, or at least drawn, my game 2 as well against Tom. And it came down a little bit to people not understanding what cult do. They know in their heads how cult play, but it's very different seeing them on the tabletop. And when the buff characters start getting into range and everything comes off and the stratagems are played, they can just eliminate anything in the game that's standing against them. And I think it's different seeing that on the tabletop to having it in your head and theory crafting against it. And I think it just catches some guys out cold.
Well, congratulations, Michael, on the big victory in that ETC test event. Hopefully next time you guys run a show, you'll tell everybody about it instead of keeping it hidden in the dark web, and we don't have to have some random fan ask us why we aren't covering it.
Why don't you boys just pick up a copy of the BCP and organize your tournaments that way?
Well, that does it for this week's show. Val, do you have anything to add?
I kind of like it, when I don't even have to host. You just sort of running the whole operation yourself now, and I'm just here making stupid voices. I think this show is maybe our best one to date.
Well, hopefully you don't forget to cut out some of our mistakes, and maybe, just maybe, this will be the one that puts us over the edge.
That's it. 1,000 views.
Well, that's all I've got. Val, do you have anything last to say?
Bye-bye.
This has been 40k Stats Center, a presentation of the Frontline Gaming Podcast Network. Like what we do? Subscribe to and rate us on YouTube and wherever podcasts can be found. Join the conversation. Follow 40k Stats Center on Facebook. You can also support the show directly by joining the Chapter Tactics Patreon and competitive 40k in general via the ITC Patreon, or by grabbing a subscription to BCP.